From the moment I said "I do" to the time I discovered the horrifying truth, I always believed my wife and I shared an unbreakable bond. We met in graduate school, where our late-night study sessions turned into romantic coffee dates. She was ambitious and magnetic, a woman who radiated confidence in every room she entered. I found her bold and captivating, with just the right mixture of empathy and witty humor. We built a life that seemed so solid we hardly questioned our foundation. We bought a quaint suburban home close to a popular gym, where she started regular workouts. I admired her dedication to fitness, never suspecting that her passion for self-improvement would lead her somewhere dark. Looking back, I see how I refused to acknowledge the red flags. She grew distant, complaining about trivial matters and taking secretive phone calls. I brushed it all aside, trusting her completely. Things changed more drastically when she started training under a well-known personal instructor named Mark. She was thrilled about his expertise, and at first, I was happy she found someone who motivated her. But almost overnight, she began talking about Mark incessantly. She'd share details about his chiseled physique, discipline, and knowledge in nutrition. I tried not to let jealousy infest my mind, though her endless praise made it challenging. Whenever I'd invite her to a movie or a spontaneous dinner, she'd say she was too exhausted from her intense workout. Oddly enough, she never looked particularly worn out. Instead, she looked exhilarated, glowing with an energy I didn't quite recognize. Soon, she was spending more time at the gym than at home. I tried to remain supportive, naively believing that couples need space to grow as individuals. Yet, an uncomfortable knot settled in my stomach. I work as a software developer, which means I spend long hours hunched over my computer. It's not glamorous, but it pays well. Our finances always seemed comfortable, and we had a decent savings account that we both contributed to, or so I thought. My father, a retired businessman, had quietly insisted on paying for our house as a wedding gift. He placed the property under his name with a legal agreement that we could live there rent-free. At first, I was embarrassed, feeling like I hadn't fully earned my lifestyle. Dad insisted it was his way of investing in my future, knowing the mortgage-free security would let me focus on building my career. My wife knew about this arrangement, but seemed unconcerned as long as we had a roof over our heads. She never once asked if she could be added to the title. As her devotion to the gym grew, my wife began dressing differently. Tight workout clothes, sometimes revealing more skin than I felt comfortable with. I tried to broach the topic gently, but she brushed me off, saying that Mark suggested these outfits to better track her form. I attempted to be open-minded, reminding myself that it was just clothing. But every time she left for her sessions, I felt this gnawing sense of unease. It wasn't about jealousy alone, it was also about her abrupt behavioral shift. She'd come home late, claiming they had arranged additional training outside normal hours. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong, but I sensed I was losing her. One night, she left her phone on the kitchen counter, and messages from Mark popped up. They were personal, far too intimate for a mere trainer-trainee relationship, and I felt my heart drop. I confronted her that night, my voice trembling with disbelief and anger. She accused me of invading her privacy. Instead of reassuring me, she lashed out, saying I was overreacting. According to her, Mark was just a close friend who supported her fitness journey. But the messages told a different story, talk of secret rendezvous and emotional confessions that left no doubt in my mind. I demanded an explanation, and she started crying, alternating between guilt and irritation. She blamed me for not paying enough attention to her, not being exciting or spontaneous, as if her betrayal could be pinned on my routine job and predictable lifestyle. In a twisted way, it almost made me feel guilty. But the more I listened, the more I realized this was a manipulative tactic. She was trying to shift responsibility, to make me question my worth. I refused to accept her half-baked excuses. I told her I knew she was lying, that the texts made everything painfully clear. She grew defensive, throwing insults about my physical appearance. She ridiculed my body, implying I wasn't man enough to keep her satisfied. It was a low blow, one that shattered any lingering affection I had for her. The sting was intense, but it also fueled a burning desire for retribution. I vowed I wouldn't let her walk away from this unscathed. If she thought she could humiliate me and still live comfortably off my earnings, she was mistaken. I'd never been vengeful before, but betrayal has a way of awakening dormant instincts. I felt a surge of anger so potent it nearly overpowered me. It was in that moment I decided I would not forgive her. There would be consequences she never saw coming. The day after our confrontation, she pretended everything was normal, as if I'd simply forget the vile words she hurled at me. I started plotting my next move, seeking legal advice from a discreet family lawyer I trusted. He explained that because the house was legally in my father's name, she had no rightful claim to it. We also examined our joint savings account, which I assumed we both contributed to equally. In reality, I had been funneling most of my paycheck into it, while she barely added anything. This was a blessing in disguise. Not only did it confirm her lack of genuine investment in our marriage, it also gave me a clearer financial edge. My lawyer advised me to gather more evidence before filing for divorce, suggesting I document her infidelity and any manipulative behavior. Armed with this knowledge, I felt empowered. She continued her affair in a brazen manner. I'd wake up to find her already gone, presumably at the gym. She posted photos on social media, subtle selfies that showed Mark in the background. Friends started asking awkward questions, noticing how often she mentioned him. Meanwhile, I played the role of the clueless husband, never reacting publicly, but internally, I was documenting every suspicious move. I even visited the gym once or twice, pretending to be interested in a membership. She looked shocked and annoyed when she saw me there, her eyes darting nervously. Mark appeared overly friendly, shaking my hand with a cocky grin. I felt anger simmer under my skin, but I controlled myself. My lawyer advised me that I needed tangible proof, not just hunches, so I hired a private investigator. This was no longer just about heartbreak, it was strategic warfare. The investigator was thorough, gathering photographic evidence of them leaving the gym together, entering Mark's apartment, and even dining at upscale restaurants under the guise of late-night training. Each new picture or video felt like a punch to the gut, yet I forced myself to look. I wanted no confusion in the courtroom about who broke the vows. One evening, while reviewing some particularly incriminating footage, I thought about confronting Mark directly. But I resisted the urge. A confrontation might jeopardize my legal advantage. Instead, I quietly compiled everything into labeled folders, creating a timeline of deception. My father, sensing the tension, asked if things were all right. I confided in him, and he reassured me that I had his full support. He reminded me once again that the house and savings were in his name, meaning she couldn't claim what wasn't legally mine to begin with. Armed with undeniable proof, I finally filed for divorce. The day she was served the papers, she flew into a rage, accusing me of ambushing her. She expected some drawn-out discussion where she could manipulate the narrative, maybe even negotiate for more favorable terms. But I wasn't about to let her spin the situation. I kept my distance, channeling my emotions into a cold, calculated resolve. She stormed around the house, threatening that she'd take half of everything, including the home and what she assumed were our mutual assets. Little did she know, the financial accounts and property she coveted had never truly been in my possession. I almost pitied her ignorance, but the memory of her betrayal quickly extinguished any sympathy. My lawyer assured me we had a solid case, given the damning evidence of her affair and the legal ownership structure my father had arranged. As the court date loomed, her behavior oscillated between smug confidence and desperation. Sometimes she'd openly taunt me, flaunting her plans to move on and start fresh with my money. Other times, she'd break down, sobbing about how she loved me all along but got swept up in a moment of weakness. I recognized her ploys, each designed to weaken my resolve. Nonetheless, part of me felt an aching sadness for what we once had, but I reminded myself that her betrayal was a conscious choice. Forgiveness wasn't an option, not after she had humiliated me and tried to blame me for her moral failing. I maintained a calm facade, letting her believe she might walk away with half. The private investigator found even more incriminating evidence, bank statements showing she'd been siphoning money into a separate account. Every new revelation cemented my decision to stand firm. When the trial finally began, she marched in with an air of entitlement, her attorney by her side. I felt a momentary pang of nervousness, but it melted away the instant I recalled her treachery. My lawyer presented a meticulously organized case, starting with the evidence of her infidelity. The judge's expression hardened as each compromising photo and text message was displayed. Then came the financial records illustrating her minimal contributions and clandestine siphoning. Her confident demeanor started to crack, especially when we revealed that the house was owned by my father. She turned to her lawyer, clearly baffled by this unexpected twist. I watched her face contort as she realized she couldn't stake a claim on something that wasn't legally mine. Her anger was palpable, but there was nothing she could do. The entire courtroom seemed to feel the weight of her impending loss. Her attorney attempted to paint me as a neglectful husband, suggesting that her affair was a cry for attention. He argued that she deserved compensation because she had grown accustomed to a certain lifestyle. My lawyer swiftly disassembled this argument, showing that any semblance of luxury was courtesy of my father's generosity and my steady earnings. The judge appeared unmoved by her sob stories, focusing instead on the indisputable facts. I caught glimpses of her face reddening each time another piece of evidence contradicted her claims. Mark was subpoenaed to testify, but he conveniently failed to appear. That only solidified the court's perception of her unfaithfulness. Toward the end, she looked panicked, as though she finally understood the gravity of her situation. I remained stoic, letting my lawyer do the talking, inwardly reveling in the sweet taste of her downfall. On the final day of the trial, the judge delivered the verdict. The marriage was dissolved on grounds of her infidelity. She was granted no spousal support, given she had a stable job and had contributed little to our shared finances. The house remained under my father's ownership, out of her reach. As for the joint savings, the court recognized that the bulk of it came from my earnings. She received a nominal settlement, just enough to close the matter. Her face was a mask of shock and fury. Gone was the haughty confidence she'd displayed earlier. I felt a rush of vindication, tempered by a lingering sorrow for what we could have been. Yet, I had no regrets. The moment the gavel struck, I knew this was the justice I deserved, the justice she had tried to evade. Leaving the courthouse, I felt an odd mixture of relief and emptiness. A chapter of my life had closed, and though I'd won, the victory tasted bittersweet. The woman I once adored had morphed into a stranger, someone capable of deliberate cruelty and deceit. Still, I had no intention of forgiving her. That would mean invalidating the agony she inflicted. She tried to corner me in the hallway to talk, but I brushed past her, uninterested in any last-minute attempts at reconciliation or justification. My father patted me on the shoulder, silently reminding me that I wasn't alone. Freed from the marriage, I looked forward to rebuilding my life on a foundation of honesty and self-respect. If the divorce had taught me anything, it was that trust is fragile and the cost of betrayal is incalculable. In the weeks following, I found myself grappling with a surge of conflicting emotions. Anger persisted, refusing to diminish, but so did an unexpected sense of freedom. No more anxious nights, no more second-guessing her every word. I started going out more, reconnecting with friends I'd unintentionally neglected during the turmoil. Some of them confessed they'd suspected her affair, having seen her and Mark together. They'd tried to warn me, but never found the right moment. Learning this stung, but it also reaffirmed my decision. She hadn't just betrayed me, she'd humiliated me publicly. My father encouraged me to turn the page, but I wasn't fully ready. Vengeance had been served in the courtroom, yet a lingering bitterness remained. Perhaps it was the final vestige of heartbreak, refusing to let me heal too quickly. One day, while sorting through old photos, I came across pictures from our honeymoon. We looked happy, genuinely so. The memory rattled me, stirring an odd mixture of nostalgia and disgust. I realized the woman in those photos no longer existed, if she ever did. Sometimes people wear masks, and we discover their true nature only when they choose to reveal it. Rather than dwell on these images, I stuffed them into a box, determined not to let them haunt me further. I channeled my energy into improving my health, working out regularly, though not at her old gym. A new sense of purpose took root in me, driving me to focus on personal growth. Each day felt a little clearer, as if shedding the toxic remnants of that marriage. Yet, the specter of betrayal lingered, ensuring I wouldn't fall into blind trust again. News traveled fast. Mutual acquaintances learned that she'd lost the divorce battle in spectacular fashion. Some took my side unreservedly, while others tried to remain neutral, muttering cliches about how there are two sides to every story. I let them believe what they wanted. I'd presented my side in court, under oath, supported by concrete evidence. That was enough for me. A few even speculated that I might forgive her in time, but they clearly didn't understand what she had done. Infidelity, coupled with public humiliation and deceit, left no room for forgiveness in my heart. I was done being the nice guy who turned the other cheek. I might be civil if we ever crossed paths, but not because I had any lingering affection. It was solely out of respect for myself, a testament to my resolve never to be manipulated again. As time went on, I felt stronger, more centered. I dedicated myself to my work, poured my spare time into exploring new hobbies, and even began traveling a bit. My father and I grew closer. His unwavering support had been a beacon through the darkest days. I realized how lucky I was to have him in my corner, safeguarding me from the financial ruin she had hoped to inflict. Every once in a while, I'd receive a text from her number, short, pitiful messages about missing what we had. I deleted them without reply, unwilling to reopen old wounds. I knew any response would only invite more manipulation. In moments of reflection, I sometimes wondered what path her life had taken. Was she still with Mark, or had that fizzled out? Either way, I didn't really care. She was a closed book, an unwelcome chapter in my history. I never saw her again in person, but sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of her social media posts. She looked the same, posing in the gym, radiating a forced bravado. Good riddance, I'd think. My life was infinitely better without her drama. The house remained in my father's name, a testament to his foresight. I continued to save diligently, building a financial safety net that was truly mine. The scars of betrayal didn't vanish, but they stopped dictating my every thought. In time, I met someone new, a woman whose honesty and warmth stood in stark contrast to my ex-wife. And though I entered this new relationship cautiously, I felt hopeful. Every step forward was a choice to leave bitterness behind. I didn't forgive my ex. I simply removed her from the story of my future. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. Months later, I learned through a mutual acquaintance that Mark had abandoned her for another client. Apparently, their whirlwind romance fizzled out the moment her novelty wore thin. When I heard this, I felt no sympathy. My heart didn't lurch, nor did I take any smug pleasure in her misfortune. I simply shrugged. She had sown the seeds of her own downfall. As for me, life blossomed into something richer and more genuine than I had ever imagined. My new partner and I eventually bought our own place, this time under my name alone. Whenever people asked if I regretted anything, I replied with simple honesty. I regretted trusting her once, but I never regretted taking my life back without offering forgiveness. I was finally free.